Hey everyone, today I want to dansplain a little subject called propaganda. Now, most people when they think of propaganda, they think about something that happens to other people, usually in a far-off dystopian regime somewhere in the distant past. Maybe it evokes images of Soviet art or a dictator on the side of a building. But it happens to other people, it doesn't happen to you. But what if I told you you're not immune to propaganda? What if I told you your memory of events is pliable and easily altered? For example, what if I told you that Morpheus never even says "what if I told you" in The Matrix? It's just a meme that you see enough times and you develop kind of a false memory. The truth is, even people who lived through the fall of the Soviet Union and had become by then considerably inoculated against the type of propaganda they were used to seeing were still completely bedazzled once the country started to introduce modern news media forms of propaganda. Now, almost immediately after these protests started, I also heard a lot of moral hand-wringing over the respectability conversation of whether the way people are protesting is morally right or wrong. One video in particular has been making the rounds online. About a week ago I posted it and I said, something about it just feels a little sus. You may have encountered it. I want you to watch it now and tell me what you see.
You can protest all you want, but the shit I just saw take place. So when you think about this anger and this fucking rage, because there's a way to get answers. Every single last one of you better be fucking registered to vote. Yes, ma'am. Every single last one of you.
We are. Yeah.
Now I know when most people think crisis actor, they think like Alex Jones, Sandy Hook denier, tinfoil hat stuff. But it's a very well documented political tactic. There's companies like Crowds on Demand. In 2016 in New York, a Geico-sponsored Skyrider and crowds of actors were hired to participate in a pogo stick dance party denying the Armenian genocide. Astroturfing is the practice of obscuring the sponsors behind a message, but presenting it as if it originates organically from grassroots participants. It's like native advertising for an ideology. The fucking lockdown protests that happened a month ago were a great example of astroturfing. Those protests were originally sponsored by and proliferated by the Dorr brothers, who are a wealthy Second Amendment group. And they represented the interests of capital, not of workers dying to get back to their jobs. But the disproportionate media coverage eventually made it seem like it was all these people want to go back to work. I don't fucking want to go back to work. Fuck work.
And you created an unsafe goddamn environment. And I am tired of it. And you fucking think this is a protest? For the sake of what? So you can go back home to your fucking comforts. I don't care how you decide to organize and protest. But you don't fucking riot. And you will fucking realize this resident doesn't look like any of you. Because she is black. She has a fucking right to be mad. So you want to fucking do something? Make sure you register to vote. Don't start another goddamn fire, and you better pass it on to all of your fucking friends.
So, if you're like most people, you see an impassioned woman of color who just happened to be caught on camera launching into a impromptu soliloquy, scolding and bemoaning the people causing property damage in the lower income community where she lives. It's a plausible premise. And for the average person, it's difficult to recognize the difference between a professionally produced piece of propaganda shot on a professional camera and something that just happened to be caught, on an iPhone. It's subtle, but there is a difference. So I see this and I think, is this some kind... So I see this and I think, is this some kind of astroturf, crisis actor, agitprop to discredit, demoralize, and defang outrage and dissent over racist police brutality that's gone on unchecked in this country for a long-ass time. She seems to articulate every bullet point of the centrist moral conversation on protest respectability, especially when she comes out of nowhere with, every last one of you better be registered to vote.
Every single last one of you better be fucking registered to vote. Make sure you're registered to vote.
In fact, it echoes a lot of the talking points in a statement that Obama put out, appealing to electoralism and de-escalation over direct action. The thing is, like most content that ends up online, it gets screen capped and reshared and laundered around until it's very difficult to establish original authorship. The guy who filmed, edited, and uploaded the video claims he does not know who she is and has been looking for her since. But I found her. She was a deputy director of media operations, senior press aide, and advisor to the press secretary of the Obama administration White House for 10 years. Here she is with handsy Uncle Joe's arm around her. Here she is in a room with Hillary Clinton. Here's her IMDb, where she's credited to a hagiography documentary on Obama's last year in the White House. Here she is on CNN.
The wonderful part about working for the Obamas is that we didn't question their character or their judgment, and as a staffer, we could really just focus on doing the work to serve the American people. And so I think anyone who goes to work for the federal government knows how important it is to be above reproach.
Now she operates a strategic communications and engagement firm that provides targeted messaging and public engagement strategies, including crisis management. In other words, a propaganda studio. Now, some of my friends watching this may be thinking, wait a minute, Obama, they're the good guys, right? And that might be a conversation y'all ain't ready to have yet. It isn't so much that this woman isn't allowed to or wouldn't be expected to espouse a fairly heterodoxical opinion on everything going on right now. What it is the disingenuous premise that she's just a person on the street and that she represents a legitimate mouthpiece for the movement, for the Vox Populi. Plenty of the things she's saying are fully defensible and unfalsifiable. Like, don't smash up an immigrant-owned mom-and-pop shop. But those things function as a Trojan horse for what is essentially a reformist ideology that does not serve the oppressed she presumes to speak for. And to be clear, I don't presume to speak for the movement either. I'm a fucking idiot. And by comparison, I'll be fully transparent about the fact that I was paid by George Soros to make this video. I think I'm mostly speaking to other white people here who have decided to start listening to black people this week. And let me also make the caveat, it isn't lost on me the optics of me, a white ass person, telling you to listen critically to this specific black woman. But if your identitarian qualifications for who gets to speak for a movement don't intersect with class, then you don't serve the people most oppressed by a power structure that sublimates to class disparity as its primary mechanism of action. I think some people like this video because it gives them permission to feel better for not directly participating with this moment in history. And there are other ways to participate other than being out on the street. But you know what I think really gets off on this shit? It's the white people washing the feet of black organizers at protests. That shit's weird. That's some psychosexual kink shit. I honestly think some white people just get off on being chastised by a frankly obtuse and demeaning stereotype of an angry black woman so that they can feel absolution. That's fetishization. And at the end of the day, if you're weaponizing black voices to confirm your own bias without fighting to address the underlying economic and systemic conditions that keep black people down in this country, then you're operating to the detriment of the communities that you believe you're trying to empower. Before riot police were sent in to beat the shit out of the last remnants of the Occupy protesters under the Obama administration, it was a movement which, despite all the good intent of the individuals involved, was functionally an FBI-sanctioned entrapment scheme and pressure release valve for economic anxiety and class unrest in the wake of the last recession. It fell victim to the tried and true counterinsurgency tactics of provocation of infighting and a lack of a unified consensus and articulation of demands. And it eventually diluted to kumbaya. And that's the role of media within the state apparatus, to absorb, denature, and sell back to you a repackaged facsimile of symbols of dissent. Take, for example, the genuinely traumatic and infuriating image of the murder of George Floyd, the officer kneeling on his neck for 9 minutes. A week or two later, you've got members of Congress in kente cloth kneeling in solidarity. You've got police officers kneeling at protests, effectively appropriating that image and the rage that came with it. When you take away the ability of people held down by institutionalized violence to wield force in confrontation of that institution, their voices are no longer heard. This is how the state, when confronted with insurrection, wields soft power. What does get heard? Stealing a police horse.
I stole the police horse, fuck it!
Stealing a Humvee from the National Guard. Burning down a fucking police station. There are people with a vested interest in making all of this unrest at the recognition of a broken system go away. Suffice to say, none of these people have your class interests in mind, and they will, at every turn, try and control how you think and feel.